There are going to be 4 techniques that we're going to learn today and practice in our watercolors. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to separate the top of your paper into 4 different boxes. They don't have to be perfect, but so that you can demonstrate each of the techniques. We're going to label each box so that you can look back and always figure out which is which. The first one we're going to do is blend colors. We're going to mix more than one color together and see how it looks in the watercolors. The next one we're going to do is going to be wet on wet. Very simple technique. The next one, graded wash. Graded wash. And that's going to be almost like an ombre where it starts dark and gets lower and lower and lower and lighter and lighter and lighter. And then the last one is a resist. So to prepare our paper, we're going to need to get the resist. We're going to use some oil pastels just to see how it looks. So maybe you want to do the pattern you practiced. Maybe you just want to sketch out some interesting shapes and lines. But put a little oil pastel in your resist box. Next thing you need is your paint set, and you're going to need a paintbrush. And of course your cup of water. So here's my cup of water, here's my paint, and my paint set. These paint sets have been checked out. They should be pretty good and have all your different colors. In my project I'm using cool colors, so for my examples I'm going to use cool colors and test out different ideas that I have for my project. So for blended color, we're going to paint with a couple spins of a couple colors and just blend them together and see how we can change it. So watercolors mean you need your paintbrush wet first, nice and dripping wet, and you need to wet the colors you're going to use. So I'm going to wet all the cool colors, and I'm going to add black, and I'm going to add a little bit to the red because I might want to make like red violet for my cool color area. So now that they're all wet, I can go to blended colors and just a couple back and forth or spins in blue, and I'm going to paint some of that blue on there. Nice and gentle. Now I'm going to see what happens if I rinse it out and add a little green. Now if I lay it over here, they're just next to each other. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix them together, and as long as the paints are wet, they should start to blend and become a new color. So right here I've got that blue-green started. Because they're watercolors, even if it looks dry, adding more wet to an area will change that. So this could be a whole color I could use in an area of my painting because it's still a cool color. I could add a little more green. See what happens when I mix that in. Now I'm not digging in my paper, I'm just mixing it on top. I don't want to dig or rip up my paper. But I really like blending those two colors together. You could blend with black in a color, or colors that maybe are both cool but not necessarily next to each other, so I could do green and purple. But just play with blending two colors together, like mixing them together on your paper. Wet on wet is the next one. I love this technique. The first thing you do is get just water on your paintbrush and wet your paper. Just do a nice coat of wet. I didn't wipe it or anything. I just dipped in and then put it on my paper. Now that it absorbed a bit, I can take any color I want, get a bit on my paintbrush, and as I paint it's going to fan out and spread. So if I do just a dot, look at it moving and traveling all over the paper. I can do a line. Now I can't control what it's doing. I can guess where it's going to go, but I really don't know in the end because, you know, I thought that might fan as much as this and it doesn't quite. You can do more than one color. But if you're someone who wants it to look a certain particular way, wet on wet may not be the right technique for you because you really can't control what it's going to do. It's got a mind of its own, which is part of the fun of using wet on wet. But it's not for everyone. You can tell up here I didn't have quite as much water, so it's not fanning as much. We want it to be wet like this where it really spreads and blends. So now we've got wet on wet. The next technique is graded wash. For this one, you really need to make sure you get your color really dark. So I'm going to start with blue, and I'm going to get quite a bit on my brush. It's really pretty dark blue on my brush, but I'm going to keep going even more than that because I really want it dark. At the top, you're going to do one nice smooth line across. It's really dark, right? Now, all I'm going to do is dip into the water, pull it out, wipe it off, and do a line underneath that. They do need to touch, they overlap, and it got a little lighter. Dip in, wipe it off. I'm not going back and forth, I'm not rinsing it, I'm just dipping. And do the next line. Dip in, rinse it off, or wipe it off, sorry, no rinsing. And they overlap, and I keep going. You can see it's really dark and getting lighter and lighter and lighter. For whatever reason, my paper didn't want to absorb up here. Add a teens more. Okay, dip, rinse off, wipe off, oh my gosh. And there's my last layer. Now if I hold my paper up, the colors might still move more, so I'm going to try and keep it flat so my graded wash dries just like that. You can keep going with just more water and keep pulling it till it's almost clear. But as long as it goes from dark to a really light color, that's a graded wash. And now my last one with the resist, all I need to do is paint on top of it with a color. So let's do green. I'll do some complementary colors. Got green on my brush, and I paint over it. What it does is it balls up. It does not want to be on top of the oil pastel. If I scrub with my brush really hard, I can start to pull it off of my paper, which is not a good idea. It's not good for your paper, it's probably not very good for your brush, and it's not going to be good for your project. But when you look up close, you can see that it resisted the nice red color so that it doesn't even want to stick on there if I put water on. It pulls away. Alright, those are your 4 techniques. The bottom of your paper is for you to play, explore, try different colors, try techniques, think about what you might want to do in your picture.